You woke up this morning already behind. Emails waiting. A calendar full of blocks. A to-do list longer than the hours you have to finish it. You call this normal. You call this the human condition. But the real answer is far stranger. For most of human history, people worked less than you do right now, and they weren't lazy. They weren't unlucky. They had figured something out that you haven't. Picture a cave. Firelight. Someone gnawing on a bone at the entrance of a rock shelter, scanning the horizon for anything that moves. That's the image you've been given. Endless struggle. Endless hunger. A life that was, in the words drilled into you since childhood, nasty, brutish, and short. It's a good story. It's also mostly wrong. In 1966, an anthropologist named Marshall Sahlins stood in front of a room of his peers and said something that broke the field in half. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. Not affluent because they had more stuff. Affluent because they wanted less. Their needs were small, and their environment met those needs quickly. Sahlins pointed to real fieldwork, hard data collected from groups like the Jew/Hoansi San of the Kalahari, and the numbers told a story nobody expected. How many hours a day do you think a hunter-gatherer spent finding food? Sit with that question for a second. Anthropologist Richard Lee actually went and counted. In the 1960s, he lived among the Jew/Hoansi and tracked exactly how they spent their time. What he found was that adults spent around 15 hours a week on subsistence. 15, not 15 hours a day. 15 hours a week securing enough food to live well in an environment most people call harsh, unforgiving, half desert. The rest of their time went to rest, to conversation, to crafting tools, to storytelling, to simply existing without an agenda. That number stunned the anthropological world because it didn't fit the story. The story said survival was a full-time job every day for your entire life until it ended early. Lee's fieldwork suggested something closer to the opposite. Survival, once you knew your landscape intimately, was efficient. It left room. Here's where your brain probably objects. Surely it wasn't that simple. Surely there was danger, disease, starvation during hard seasons. And you'd be right. Life was not soft. Life was often short by modern standards, mostly because of infant mortality and violence, not because people were grinding themselves down chasing food from dawn to dusk. Once you survived childhood, your daily rhythm may have looked less frantic than the one you're living today, not more. So what did people actually do with their day? If not toil, they gathered. But gathering wasn't random wandering. It was skilled, learned, passed down knowledge. A forager knew which plants fruited in which season, which roots were safe 2 months before anyone else could identify them, where water pooled after a specific kind of rain. This wasn't guesswork. It was expertise built over a lifetime, held collectively by an entire group. Hunting worked the same way. It required patience, tracking skill, deep knowledge of animal behavior, and often cooperation between many people at once. But knowledge and skill don't take 15 hours a week to deploy. They take 15 hours a week because the people using them had gotten extremely good at reading their world. Efficiency, not exhaustion, was the point. The rest of the day belonged to something you rarely get enough of. Idle time spent with other people. Sitting, talking, teaching children through stories instead of lectures. Repairing tools while gossiping about who did what to whom. Anthropologists who lived among modern-day hunter-gatherer groups, including the Hadza Tanzania, describe long stretches of unstructured social time, not because these societies lacked ambition, because they lacked the specific modern belief that every hour must be productive. That belief is newer than you think. It didn't arrive with farming. Exactly. Though farming cracked the door open, it arrived in its most intense form with industrialization. When your labor could be measured, timed, and sold by the hour, time itself became a resource to extract value from. Before that shift, for the overwhelming majority of human history, time was something you simply lived inside of. There's a physiological piece to this too, and it comes from a more recent study. Evolutionary anthropologist Herman Pontzer spent years measuring the actual energy expenditure of the Hadza using doubly labeled water, a technique that tracks calories burned with precision. His team expected Hadza hunter-gatherers, given her physically active lifestyle, to burn significantly more total calories per day than sedentary people in industrialized countries. The results surprised almost everyone. Daily energy expenditure was nearly the same. Human bodies, Pontzer's research suggests, may have evolved a kind of internal budget, adjusting other systems to keep total output roughly constant regardless of activity level. Why does that matter for a conversation about how people spent their days? Because it suggests something deeper than a schedule difference. It suggests your body may still be calibrated for a rhythm of exertion and rest that your modern life almost never lets you follow. Burst of effort, stretch and recovery, repeat, not a flat, unbroken line of low-grade obligations stretching from 6 in the morning until you collapse into bed. Think about your own week for a moment. How much of it is genuinely necessary for your survival, and how much of it is obligation stacked on top of obligation, expectation on top of expectation. Somewhere along the way, a version of busyness became a status symbol. Being slammed became something you announce, almost proudly, in casual conversation. A full calendar reads as importance. Free time reads as suspicious. Even lazy, even though the fossil and ethnographic record suggests free time might be closer to the species' baseline than the aberration. None of this means you should romanticize the past. Disease could be devastating. Violence between groups happened. Infant and child immortality was brutally high by any modern measure, and that alone reshapes how short those lives could be statistically. This isn't called to trade your house for a rock shelter. It's a much narrower claim, but a sharper one. The assumption that humans have always worked constantly just to stay alive doesn't hold up against the actual data anthropologists have collected in the field. So if survival didn't consume every waking hour, what filled the space instead? Relationships did. Groups that shared food, shared child-rearing, shared knowledge freely, tended to survive better than isolated, hoarding individuals. Cooperation wasn't a nice bonus feature of early human life. It may have been the actual survival strategy, more so than any single person's hunting prowess. That reshapes the picture completely. The strongest hunter-gatherer societies weren't grinding harder than everyone else. They were connected better than everyone else. You carry a body built by that history, but you live inside a culture built by something much newer. The mismatch between the two might explain more of your modern exhaustion than any individual failure of time management ever could. It's not that you're bad at managing your hours. It's that the entire structure asks something of you that almost nothing in your evolutionary past prepared you for. Sustained, unbroken, hour after hour output, disconnected from season, from community, from rest built into the rhythm rather than squeeze and around the edges. There's a strange comfort in that. If you let it sit, your exhaustion isn't a personal defect. It's a structural mismatch between an ancient nervous system and a relatively recent invention called the workday, recognizing that doesn't hand you 15-hour work weeks. It won't rewrite your calendar tomorrow morning, but it might change how you talk to yourself about rest. Rest isn't a reward you have to earn after enough hours of grinding. For most of the species' existence, rest was simply part of how a day was supposed to go. So the next time your to-do list stretches past what feels human, remember that it probably is exactly that, past what's human. Somewhere in your genes, in the rhythm your ancestors moved through for a few 100,000 years, there's a version of a day that looked completely different from yours. Fewer hours chasing survival. More hours simply present with the people around you. You woke up this morning already behind. Maybe the problem was never you. Maybe it was the very idea of behind itself.